So, anyway, I think we're good. Namaste. We're back again. This is your lucky day or not, however, which way you view it. But after reviewing the other videos that I just put up, I decided it might be good to have a little more talking about the different states of consciousness and what's the difference between when things arise in its witness state or oneness or a nirvikalpa falling away into that ongoing non-duality, because they are vastly different. But as one's going through the process, unfortunately, one doesn't know what's beyond the next level or layer, and one takes it to be something other than what it is. And this is why I have some problem with people reading non-dual texts before it's time. Because one, at that point, you know, when you have an expansion occur, one wants to run with that and then project onto it that, oh, this is what they're talking about, and this is where I'm at, and there's no me, etc., etc., etc. Because one doesn't know the difference at that point. In my case, I didn't read any non-dual texts. I knew nothing about the Ashtabakra Gita, knew nothing about Ramana, knew nothing about any of these things until after everything deconstructed and fell away. Then when I read it, it was like, yes, 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 this is what it is. It was not an attempt to manufacture something to fit that. So this is where we're starting today, and what I wanted to speak with Lisa and Anna and I were having a little bit of discussion, and as usual, it's like, oh, well, this would be a good thing. And so hopefully it comes back, because a lot of times when you're speaking on something and you stop for a second, that energy is lost and then it's gone. Since there's not revolving mind, it quickly, that energy dissipates, and then it doesn't come up again. So.
Well, I know here, until it's directly experienced, the non-dual reality, it blows everything else out of the water, but until it's experienced, that other can be taken for something else. Like quiet mind is vastly different than the non-dual reality, that palpable non-dual presence.
Right, and that quiet mind can come up earlier in the journey. For me, quiet mind began to arise when I was in San Francisco, when I wasn't even, you know, a quarter of the way through the journey at that point. The first time that the mind dropped into quiet mind, I've spoken about this before, I was sitting in Café Trieste, was having a latte. I can tell you exactly what was going on at the time. That's how much of an import it feels at the moment. And there was at that point this great expansion into witness state. And there was some silence of the mind at that point, not as many thoughts, and there were moments of that quiet that were there. Now this is not the same as when the mind falls away and there is no reconstructing of things. So when one goes into witness state, there is that time where one is able to watch their actions and comment on it as it's going on. So there's a big buffer zone. But at that point, the expansion can feel like it's so much that one can think, oh, there's no me, because there's just, you know, seeing what's taking place. But there's not the involvement. There's a distancing. One starts to develop that vairagya, or that dispassion starts to arise at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak here to the journey here, having, like I say, still some cycling through of mind. and some great gaps where that non-dual, it's just a non-dual palpable presence, everything washes clean, and there it is spontaneously. But again, there's still some cycling through, and here there's just, the mind becomes very fluid, and where, there's that quietude within that, there's expansion within that, there's contraction, there's all sorts of things that come and go, where one can, since it becomes just so vastly different than the mundane mind or what you're used to, can be taken to be something other than. And I have to say, when that non-dual presence comes forward, everything else is blown out. It's like a rock solid, palpable presence. But along the way, there's all these other different states that what happens too, to say that, okay, when mind starts coming back, oh, there's no one here, that spiritual ego starts getting developed of it's all God, and they're just their thoughts coming forward that way, which is really takes one as far away from it as any thought, really. It's just, again, that's when one can delude themselves into thinking they're done, and that becomes a whole nother problem, because it does impede progress, feeling like you're done, when really those thoughts are still there, and there is that shakti, that play continuing, which does bring one out into suffering again, eventually, into that mind. And so just to, until all thoughts are gone, that one is not done. And so just to keep going forward, immersing in the practices, and not try to convince yourself that you're somewhere other than what's really happening, to be very honest with Guruji about, yes, there are still thoughts. This took place, but there's still thoughts, so that she knows exactly where you're at, because she can only take what's being said. I mean, that's how it is. So again, having gone through so many different levels and back and forth and things, just having the child and all these different things, just to continue, don't try to convince yourself, just to continue to immerse in the practices and things, and the pointings.
Yeah, so anyway, I want to get back to talking about the different states. When witness state arises, then it's more of the feeling of that unreality, and it's more of being able to watch what's taking place without as much involvement in it. And it does feel extremely expanded, and that there is not that, people take it as being no persona, because they're not as caught up in the action and the activity as they were. That does not mean there is not a persona in place. Just because there's that developing vairagya or that dispassion that's in place at that time. One can be doing an action and can comment on the action at the same time. Okay, so that is witness state. Again, feels very, very expanded. There can be moments of quiet mind coming in and out at that point. Okay. Then one goes into oneness. When one bounces into oneness, then again, people have this mistaken idea that it's a non-duality, because at that present time, especially if you're bhakti, you're being very heart-centered, and that heart-centered has now opened and expanded, then what takes place is everything is God. I only see God. If you're in love with Krishna at that point, then this is Krishna, that's Krishna, this is Krishna, it's all Krishna. I'm just seeing Krishna in every person, and we're all part of the same whole. Still, that's not non-duality at that point. Oneness, it has a quality of being one, but it's still divided. Okay, there's still a division there. There's still somebody that's witnessing, that one feels to be, oh, I'm like that Krishna, and this is Krishna, it's all Krishna, it's all, one may say it's all Brahman if they've read non-dual texts, but there's still some essence of that persona there, very, very blissful, bouncing off the walls bliss at that point in time. Okay, that's oneness. We're all part of the whole, It's all so important. We all have our own aspects, and it's beautiful, and this is what rises. And this is where unfortunately, a lot of the New Age things, they stop there. That we want to be co-creators with God, etc., etc., and you get into a lot of that dynamic with that. Again, but that's not realization, that's not non-duality, but it's a very, very heady, very intoxicating, one can say they're God intoxicated, and at that point again, people don't want to hear that this is not realization. When you're in that expansion, well, wait a minute, it's all God, so there's not me. There's no me, but there still is, at that point, very much a me that's in love with God and in love with all of these things. It's a big, at that point, everything is love, unconditional love. It's all, and that's the dynamic of oneness. Okay. So one is in that expansion of oneness. There's a lot less, well, I can't say a lot less pull to the world at that time, because one is at that point enamored of the world and enamored of everything that's in the world.
People don't want to leave that state really easily.
No, they don't want to leave that state because it's very intoxicating. And one wants to think at that point that they're done. So they become God realized at that point. Okay. Eventually then, one is drawn into, if they continue forward, things deconstruct into a nirvikalpa samadhi, where all of that again blows out. One enters nirvana, or an extinguishing. Okay. The other one is the big flame that's going, then it becomes the extinguished. Okay, then all that karma and everything falls. And in that point, there's only this non-dual. Okay, there's not a love towards the world. There's only that. And so this becomes extinguished. Now this sounds like a terrible thing. Isn't it better to be in love with the world and everything is love and everything is oneness and we're all one and it's all, But it's not, because still on the other side of that is still suffering. Okay? And there's still, that's why they have that one point that it says even the gods will envy the realized being. Well, why is that? Because the realized being is off the wheel of karma. Anyway, so when one goes into that nirvikalpa, at first when one is projected out, there may be a rerouting of mind. And so this is what I was saying. Once one has gone into that nirvikalpa and is thrown back out, there can be a lot of feeling of suffering at that point, because then one understands that it doesn't matter if one goes into that bliss and oneness, that is still a suffering state. Okay? And there is such a vast difference between oneness and a genuine non-dual state, where everything is deconstructed, it's empty, everything is empty in nature, yet it's full. It's not empty as in devoid, it's full. There is no place that this is not. Okay? And when, at that point, the storyline of being this persona has ended. It's gone. One can't remanufacture it. It's just gone, devoid of any spin or any type of a hook that remains in it. So again, it's a vast, vast difference of consciousness than it is in oneness, because still that story is in play in oneness. One is at that point wanting to save the world, and the Messiah complex arises and all these other things that one gets involved in. When it all deconstructs, then all of that deconstructs. Because what is there to save? In the end, it's all Brahman. Brahman cannot, Brahman is in control, always has been. This is why the laws of the universe are the way they are. And so then when at that point, it all just in that moment deconstructs, and that's the end of that. That's why it's called nirvana, or being blown out at that point. And when people talk about it, one would think that, oh, it would be better to be in oneness, but truly it's not, because that's still a driving force.
There's still motion in that, and it pulls landward.
Exactly.
Really, vastly different.
Exactly, because one is in love with everyone, one is in love with everything, and I think that sometimes this is why boundaries get crossed with some people. They get in that oneness state, and then they become sexualized, and that can be a dangerous place. It can also be a dangerous place when one has gone into a nirvikalpa, but the mind has not has not fully been blown out. Can you grab Raj so they'll quit barking? Because what happens is if you go into a nirvikalpa or this type of experience, and then you're thrown out and the mind reconstructs, sometimes there will be this I am God. And if you get into this I am God, then all sorts of abuses can happen, because one thinks they're above the rest of humanity. So again, it's not a true falling away. That's a very dangerous point to be at. There are many gurus, ones that have been self-proclaimed gurus, that have entered that point and then reconstructed persona and have fallen greatly at that point, because they think, I, as this persona, am God. Therefore, I am above any laws of karma because I've had this experience. And they've gone back into persona and then concocted this whole other thing that's going on, and they fall. And that's, again, another reason why one needs to have a guru the whole of the way to say, no, that's not it. As long as there's revolving mind, as long as there's anything of that nature, you are not done. And one has to continue forward, continue to do the practices, continue to do what's needed until that fruit becomes ripened and falls, and one enters that nirvana, or as sahaj nirvikalpa samadhi, which is effortless, ongoing, where there's no mind, and it's just direct consciousness that remains. So I think that's about all that can be said or needs to be said on that. It's just one thing that, going through the journey, I know what it's like, because there are many points you reach, and if you don't have a guru in place and you're not honest with them as to what exactly is taking place, then one can, at that point, really railroad and be their own worst enemy on the path.
Which we've seen time and time again happen, and so just stay steady, and there's just so many places that one can get caught up again into the illusion and the dream and believing all these things, and that's not it. So the bottom line is, if there's still thoughts, one isn't done, and just to keep going, because it's just everything that Guruji says. Once that, once mind does blow out, if we've even had a single taste of it, you'll see the vast difference, and how worthwhile beyond words it is to continue to that, to actually get completely out of suffering, which is the whole goal there.
Right. The goal is to enter moksha. And again, if you're in family life, doesn't mean you can't progress. You can progress, but it's very, very difficult for one in family life to enter into Jivan Mukti, or liberated while in life, while in bodied form, because of the dynamics of family life and all of that entails, because one is naturally projected outward at every turn. So for those that are, and get to the point of nirvikalpa experiences, and they keep projecting outwards, don't lose hope. There is the moksha at that point, when the body drops. At that point, moksha can take place, because the last of those attachments, bodily attachments, are more out the door when one loses the heavy body and goes more into the light body at death. So anyway,
Still hope.
yes, yeah. So continue forward. Don't stop. At that point, one has to continue forward. But again, I just want to reiterate, this is some of the reason that I don't have people reading non-dual texts when they come in, because I don't want them manufacturing in their mind, oh, looking for it, oh, then this is that, because it's not. There's a vast difference between self-realization and God-realization, realizing God in every moment and realizing what is that self, that Brahman, in the end. Okay? So self-realization is realizing that Brahman. God-realization is whatever external God form that you happen to be in attachment with on a journey, whether it's Krishna or Shiva or what, it doesn't matter what one is looking at that one projects outward towards. Okay? So anyway, we have a lot of steps along the journey. Just continue forward. I want to try to bring as much clarity as is possible, and there is no way to intellectually give all of this to ones that are in duality. One has to just continue to do